Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, welcome if you're new here, and welcome to my virtual studio in Vermillion. Today we're going to be painting, as you can see beside me, the beautiful Moraine Lake found in Banff National Park in Alberta, Canada. The reference photo that we're using for this one is one that I took back in 2019 when I was able to go visit there, and I will link that below on my website so you can find it and reference that if you would like to as well. Throughout this tutorial I will do close-ups of the first person view so you can see a little bit more detailed a few things that I'm doing in a few spots. But the majority of it will be in that third person view. If you ever have any questions throughout, feel free to leave a comment below or send me a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. If you haven't seen my other Vermillion tutorials, I encourage you to go back to my channel, check those ones out. I've got a bunch there that you can paint along with me as well. Alright, let's jump into this one. Alright, so here we are in a studio. We're going to be doing a square painting today as you've seen in the picture. So make sure you hit start a new painting if you haven't already. And to get this to be square, it's a little bit hard if you try to go larger, right? Because it doesn't give you the nice outline. But you can do it that way if you'd like. Oh, I almost got it there. It's easier if you just go down to the smallest 12 by 12, because then it fits it as a square. And you hold your hand on the check mark, and then you can just resize it to whatever square you'd like, and it stays proportional. So I'm going to make mine about to there for now. I'll change it throughout as we go. Just going to bring it up a little bit, as you can see the bottom of that tray if you need to. You won't be able to see it the whole time, but we'll leave it there for a little bit. Alright, so if you've painted landscape paintings with me before, then you'll know that we always start with the background and work our way to the foreground. So we're going to be doing a painting of Lake Moraine, if you've seen it in the intro. So we're going to start with the sky, the mountains, then we'll do the forest, water, and the trees in the very front. So I'm going to use the projector just a little bit here with the reference picture that I took a couple years ago. And this is just going to help us get the shape of the mountains. But before I do that, we're going to go in and paint the sky first. So then we can do the outline of the mountains or top of the sky. Otherwise, we're just going to paint over top of it with the sky, and then we'd have to redo it anyways. So you can grab your palette and grab the 2-inch brush. And there are multiple ways that you can do the sky. In previous tutorials I've laid down the liquid white to do that, but I'm going to show you a different way to do that this time, just so you can kind of try new ways and see what works best for you. So I'm just going to take some of this blue right here, and just using nice horizontal brush strokes, I'm just going to brush some of that in here. And then I'm going to take some white, just pure white, and go below it here. And I'm just going to work my way up into that blue horizontally there, and work my way back down into that white. I'm going to go up into the blue, all the way to the top, this one. Nice horizontal brush strokes, and then work our way back down into that white. If you ever looked at the horizon and the sky, you'll notice that closer to the horizon line, the sky is usually lighter, and the further up in the sky, the more saturated blue or darker blue that you'll get. And we want to go close to halfway down here. So I'm going to take this and we're just going to go a little bit further, just so that when we do the mountains, they're totally overlapping the sky. I'm just going to mix some light blue here. Not light enough. Always undo things if you need. I'm just going to go a little bit lower. Now if you want with the 2-inch brush, you can blend it out with the brush. And you can do different brush strokes to get that to blend in if you'd like. Or you can grab the blender brush, and that'll just smooth things out for you. You can do different types of brush strokes. And in the end, I'd recommend finishing with more horizontal, vertical, diagonal brush strokes. And that's just going to soften up the sky for you. Okay, so now our sky is finished. I'm going to, I've linked the reference image to my website, and before I post this I'm going to upload a smaller version so it fits all on one page, because as you can see this photo is a little bit too large for this browser here and it doesn't quite fit. So I'm going to scroll so we can see the top of it and hit the projector button there. And I'm just going to increase this size. Make sure you don't have a brush in your hand if you're wanting to use the projector piece. I've got it resized. I'm going to take it right to the top, and you can select overlay or multiply, whichever you want. Okay, once you have that where you want it, grab your rigger brush. I'm going to reset that palette. I'm just going to take some black here, take some white, just make kind of a nice gray color. It can be a medium, light or dark, or whatever works for you. And I'm just going to go into our settings here and turn down that mixing sensitivity. And all I'm going to do with this is just go in here and just outline where those mountains are. It doesn't need to be perfect because we're going to be painting over it anyways. We just want to know in general where the mountains are, where the snow is, where the layers are, things like that. And if you need to, you can turn that transparency up and down here to see where it fits best for me. Once you got that, and you have enough of the outline done, I'm going to scroll it down here. There we go. And then you can grab that and place it below. And you should notice that things will line up roughly where they're supposed to be. Hopefully by this time I've uploaded a picture that fits, and then it won't really matter for you. And again, I'm just going to outline here each of the, like the lakes and the tree lines and things like that. Alright, I think we got it there. Turn off that projector and you can see the outline of the mountains and of the trees there for the lake. Alright, so usually when I'm painting mountains or working with mountains, I'll do kind of a dark base first, and then add some light highlights, and then kind of add some medium ones. Sometimes I go dark, medium, light. If you've painted with Bob Ross before, he often goes dark, light, medium. And that's what I'm going to do with this one. So I'm just going to take the smooth dagger brush here, I'm going to reset that palette here so we have a fresh one to work with. I'm going to take a palette knife here to do a little bit of the mixing. So I'm going to take some of this darker blue here, some of the red, mixed together. Now you can see we've got a pretty vibrant purple there. So I'm going to take a little bit of brown. There we go. Now we got a nice dark purple. If you feel like it's too purple, just add a tiny bit more blue. I feel like that's too blue, so add a bit more red. Now that's nice and purple again. Oh, I'm getting away from the color that I wanted in the first place. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of this to the side here. Actually, reset it. I got a little bit of my... Okay, now that's too red. There we go. Added a bit more blue. Now we're nice and dark there. It's honestly, that's almost a black. If you wanted to add just a hint of white to it, but honestly, just a hint, because you don't want to ruin that color. You can do that. And this is very sensitive right now. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of black, just to kind of tone it down a little bit. Okay, we're going to go with that. Smooth dagger brush. You can increase the size a little bit. I'm not going to go too large here. And fill that up with some paint. Oops. And I'm just going to go in with this, and with this color I don't really want it to be mixing with anything. So I'm going to leave that mixability down for the moment. I'm going to set the and I'm just going to go along these areas. I guess I could have done the rest of these lines afterwards and just done a larger, more general outline first and then added the slightly more detailed outlines after. But we'll still know in general where everything is that we're working with. If you need to get more on your brush, grab some more on your brush here. Rotate that brush as you need it to be rotated. Actually, I don't need it there. We really just want to add this wherever we have rock. Even down right in here where I added it, it's going to be trees there. I didn't really need to add it there either. Remember, you can move your grip up and down the brush as well. You can adjust that as you go. I like using this brush because then it has the pointy end that you can get into these small little nooks more easily with. This one only needs to come to about here. It's that lighter color underneath of that. And I guess technically if you wanted to, you could leave the projector on instead of drawing these lines on like I did. This is just more of my regular process, so that's, I guess, why I'm doing it this way. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink this brush down. Oh, went too far down there. And I'm actually going to increase the size of this canvas. I'll leave it so make sure you can still see it there. There we go. Shrink that brush down. And I'm just going to go in here now and kind of add a bit more of the final touch here on the background of these mountains, going into the peaks and actually adding in the fine details on the peaks. Well, I guess I should say the fine shape of the peaks. I just have that paint on the tray below me so I don't have to go back to the palette every time. And this one's kind of got a peak going right here first, then up there as well. And it comes down in front. And again, at any point, if you feel like you need to just press B so you have a little bit of a sturdier brush, don't hesitate to do that. Okay, that makes the peaks of the mountain a bit more stable there. If you want to go in and just make these lines be a little bit closer at all, you can always go and do that. As long as we have the general idea of where things are. That's the important part. Alright, so we got the darker layer done there. Now, usually what happens now when I do mountains is I do either the medium or the lights. And so with this one, I'm actually going to go in and do the lights. And for the lights, I'm going to leave that canvas mixability down again because I want these light whites to stand out, right? So I'm going to grab this. If you want to shrink that down again a little bit, you can. I'll bring this whole thing up so you can see. If I put anything on the tray, I'll let you know. I like leaving this a bit larger for you to see. So now using Vermillion here, I'm going to try a couple different things, because usually what I'll do is I'll use a short flat, but kind of a thicker flat, not necessarily larger like this, but like thicker this way. And then I do a lot of kind of dabbing in throughout. So I'm gonna use a palette knife, because I've used a palette knife here on Vermillion before and it's given me awesome texture. So I'm gonna take just some white. Just gonna put some down in front of me too on that little tray. And you can see in our reference image here we got some snow all throughout. And so I'm going to just go in here and add some white throughout. When you put it at an angle like that, you can see it's giving us some nice texture. If you turn it more flat, then it just lays more of the paint down. If you go at more of an angle, it just adds even a bit more sparsely throughout, which is fine. That's all I'm gonna do for the moment with the whites. And bear with me here, I want to just kind of play around just for a minute here and just kind of see which brush is going to be the best for this texture on the mountainside here. So we're using the 2-inch brush. It's not bad. Just dabbing it lightly. It gives us nice little spots and it kind of starts blending it into what's around it, and that's fine. Just going to set that down. I'm going to try this one here. That's okay too. I might use that in a minute here as well. It's a little uniform though. I'm going to take the bristle fan because I've used this before. Yeah, I do like that one for this kind of texture that we're working with here. So I think I'm going to use the bristle fan brush for this. Alright, so we kind of have kind of the outline of the brightest brights. So what I want to do now is I kept some of that purple, the darker purple, on the tray in front of me, so I'll bring that onto the palette so you can see it here as well. Just going to take a little bit of white to it. Oh, that added a bit too much. Add a bit more purple to it. So we're getting a nice medium. So I'm going to add that to my tray out front as well. And with that, I'm going to turn that mixability back up, because as we're adding these highlights, we want the paint to be able to mix. And we're going to start adding the textures of the mountain in with this more medium color here. So I'm going to go in and just start dabbing it around here in the direction that, as you can see on the reference photo, that it is. If you find that it's too purple for your liking, I find that it is quite purple. Just going to take a hint of this blue here, mix it in there, take a little bit more white as well, a little bit more blue. That might be a little bit too much. There we go. Just kind of mix it around until you find the happy medium that you're looking for. And still just doing that same thing. And if you're using the bristle fan brush here, just try to keep the direction of how you're dabbing it in going with how the mountain is flowing. And don't be afraid to get right in with that white that we already added in there, because we can always go back over afterwards, and we're going to go back in afterwards and add in a bit more of those lightest lights and adjust those lightest highlights, because we're going to paint over some of it here. And if you feel like you've got it down pretty good where you want it, you can shrink this down. And then that will just kind of help you cover things a little bit faster. Because if you have your canvas too big, it'll take a long time to fill all that stuff in. But by shrinking it down, we can do this a lot faster. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to finish dabbing throughout the whole thing. I'm going to do a time lapse here for you, so you don't have to sit here and watch me dab this whole thing nice and slow. So I'll leave you be for a moment here, and if I have anything to see, I'll just do a little voiceover and keep on going from there. Alright, so I got the darker layer in there. All I'm going to do is just take and add some of this little bit of white to this. Add a little bit more blue, and just lightening it up to add another layer of highlights in, and just going in and doing the same thing, but just be sure that you're not covering up the whole thing, because we want to see those darker colors behind as well. As you're going, now you can start kind of filling in those empty spaces here along those lines, because now that we've got even just a handful of these highlights in, we can keep track of where things are supposed to be. So alright, and again, I'm just going to lighten this up a bit. I'm kind of just making sure it has a nice blue to it as well. Kind of just counters the purple backdrop that we have. The picture that I have is quite blue. We're not making it that blue. It was a rainy day that we were there, and it made everything look very blue. And as we get to these lighter highlights, I'm starting to kind of actually create a bit more of the texture that you see. Like here we have this darker spot. I'm keeping that darker spot in here, and just things like that. Really want to start adding some of that into here. Or as you can see, there's kind of like different colored parts throughout the mountain. We're gonna go in here and we're gonna do that as well. I know that this is a little bit time consuming, but adding all these layers and textures in like this is going to pay off in the end for sure. And if you get to the peaks and you want to be adding anything there, just increase that size, and that makes it easier for you to get in there. So we've really covered up a lot of those lighter highlights that we were working on, and that's fine. It gave us a good idea right at the beginning where we wanted things. I kind of neglected the front part here, so we're going to go in now and add some of these lighter highlights onto it. Well, not really that light. I would say more medium, if anything. Remember, if you ever do something you don't like, swipe the left trigger to the left, quickly undo it. Okay, so I'm going to take some even lighter blue here with this. As you can see there, I use some of this light blue here to mix in with it. And place that down right here on the tray below me. Just going to make sure it's nice and spread out so I have it there so I don't lose it. So with nature paintings and landscapes, you always kind of want to be aware of where your light source is coming from, and most often where the sun is coming from. So for us, that sun is coming from the right there. So that's why underneath in those peaks, I've left those dark lines in there because those suns wouldn't really reach there as much. There's going to be a bit more shadow. So that means on these overlapping hangovers, that's where we want those light highlights to be. I'm going to go in here and touch up these peaks with a different brush and a little bit here, one that we can have a bit more control with. Sorry if I'm kind of covering things up there with what I'm doing. With the palette there, I just realized I might be blocking what I'm doing. Just continuing with this dabbing here as we're going. I just want the palette close to me because as I'm painting and it starts to mix in with the paint that's on the canvas, I want to, you know, clean off the brush and grab the light again so it keeps it nice and light for me here. Alright, so you can see in here we've got some more brownish tinges in here. So I'm going to mix up some of that right now. So for that, I'm going to grab our palette knife to mix this up. I'm going to take some of the brown, take some of the gray, take some of that more maroon brown. We're just going to start with that. I'm going to put some down on the tray in front of me. And grab that bristle fan brush again. And then with that, we're going to go in here and really add this into where we see it here on the mountain. And it's really strong on the closer side over here. I'm going to go in and just add this in here. Quite a bit compared to some of the other spots. Alright, with that same brown, I'm just going to add a little bit of white to it. And make it a little bit lighter. And some of it almost has a bit more of a red tinge to it. So I'm going to try it out here. I'm going to try the red on the top actually. I'm going to take some of that yellow ochre. And try this out. Put a little bit on my tray just in case I like it. Alright, what I want to do before I add in the white, the snow again, I do want to take just a bit more of this blue and white here, making just a really light blue. And these are going to kind of be the lightest highlights of the rocks themselves. I'm just going to put some of that on the tray below me. Alright, I have to take a quick break, so if you see the camera angle kind of change, that's why. We'll come back in and we'll start adding in the light highlights. For you, no time will pass, but remember, if you ever need to take a break, just press pause, come back to it later. And yeah, I hope you're enjoying this so far. Alright, I just wanted to give you a quick up close of the mountains before I add in the bright highlights again. Alright, I'm going to increase the size of our canvas here. I'll bring that down so you can still see it there. I'm going to take the short smooth flat brush. And take some of the lighter highlights that we've mixed in there, and then go them into the peaks of the mountains and the sides of the mountains where I wanted a bit more control, and dab those in there. Alright, I'm going to go into our settings here and now, and I'm going to be adding in some of that white light highlights, and I don't want that white to mix around with the other stuff around it that much, so I'm going to turn that mixing sensibility down. So I just have the bristle fan brush again. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit here again. Okay, it's a bristle fan brush. Some nice white. And here we want these light highlights to really follow the same kind of pattern that the snow is happening in the photo there. This is going to show where the rocks really are going in and out and creating ledges and everything like that. So I'm going to do a little time lapse again here for you to follow along with. Slow it down if you need to at any point. We're just going to be creating the snow along the mountain, just following the reference image here. Alright, before I add in any more of the snow here, I do want to fill in kind of the shale area. And we're going to use kind of that light tan brown, that shaley color that you see there. So I'm going to use the smooth dagger brush to fill that in here. I still have that light brown mixed on my tray in front of me, so I'm just going to use that. If you don't, I just used some brown and some white and a little bit of black and some yellow ochre too, that's right. And so we'll make kind of that tan color, and we'll just fill in these areas here. Alright, now to get a little bit of that texture in that area there, I'm going to take some of this and add a bit more yellow ochre to it. Also a little bit of that darker brown that you can see. Get it on that palette knife. I'm going to change the mixability back to what it's at. And just in the direction that we're going down, I'm just going to add an angle, use the palette knife, and work my way down the mountainside. And that's going to add some nice texture in for us. And if it's too textured, just go over it a couple times again with the knife, and that'll smooth it out a little bit. Alright, now I'm just taking the lighter one again. And actually I want it to be even lighter than that, so I'm going to add some white to it. I don't really need too much of the colors on here again, so I'm just going to reset the palette just to give me some more space. I'm just going to add in some of the darker browns here as well. Alright, I'm going to leave that for a minute now. I'm going to go back in with the fan brush. Turn that mixability back down. And just gather some white here. And now go through and start mixing in the rest of that snow coming down into the shale area. And you can see in here there's a little bit of green. So I'm going to take some of this green here, some of this brown, mix in a little bit of this shale color that we had here, a little bit more of that green, and a little bit of white, just to mute it. And I'm just going to dab that in here as well. That's pretty much it for the mountain part of it. We do need to do some of the trees up here, and that's going to come with the rest of it as well. If there's any spots you want to adjust, Now is the time to do that as well. Just saw a few spots I wanted to fix up here. Alright, so I'm going to reset this because I don't need any of that right now. I'm going to take some of this green again, take some of this brown as well, and take some blue as well. So trees in the distance will usually have kind of more of a blue tinge to them. Just doing a little bit at a time because I don't want to mess it up. So I just want a nice dark green. That fan brush is our friend, so we're going to continue to use that for now. Put some of that below me here so I've got it. And with this now, I'm just going to go in here and start dabbing that in. And I'm kind of keeping my brush vertical, just so it gives more of the impression of the tops of the trees. Alright, so this is also going to come down here. Right at the far shore of the lake. And I turn my brush horizontal so because the trees aren't going to be as tall there from our view. And really these trees that we're going to be starting to do here are a little bit further away than the ones we just did. So I'm going to take the palette knife and I'm going to add some more blue into that green that we were mixing there. And that'll just help them seem a bit more distant. Then I'm going to go in here and just fill out this area here. I'm going to add a little bit of white to that. Still keeping that bluish tinge as you can see there. That's just going to add some texture to these trees, add some depth to them. Do a little bit throughout that part. We're going to take some of that green, add a little bit more white to it. A little bit too much, but just making a bit more of a muted green there, lighter green highlights that we're going to add throughout. If it's a little bit too green, then just add some blue into it like I'm doing here. I'm going to try a little bit of that lighter blue instead of the darker blue. That seems to be doing the trick. I'm just going to go back in and add a little bit of the darker. I feel like I added a little bit too much of the light highlights. That's why it's nice to keep those other highlights that you've added on your palette there that you can still use. And once you feel like you got that good, now we're going to do the tree patch right up front here. And so for that, I'm just going to use the smooth dagger to start. Just go and fill this in here. Increase that brush size. Sometimes if you increase it too much, then it's hard to lose control. So go with what you're comfortable with. Okay. Gonna grab that bristle fan brush again. Take this lighter green here. It's really just the green and the white, a little bit of brown mixed in with it if you don't have it still. I'm not using any of the blue shades anymore. And here I really want to keep these verticals because these trees are a lot closer. And easier for us to see. Alright, I'm going to set that down. That's got the trees done, mountains done. Now we're going to move on to the lake. I got to take a small break here, so I'm going to just save it. Make sure if you ever take a break that you save it. And we'll see you in a minute. Alright, so if anything jumped for you, it's because I just stepped away and I'm back here. Hopefully we'll finish it here, and I won't have to take another break. When you got a 2.5-year-old, it's tricky to find a lot of time all at once to be able to do something like this. Alright, so we're working into the lake here. And we're going to do a few things with that here. I'm going to take our smooth flat. I think I'm pretty much done with those greens. You can always mix them again, or if you want to just add them to your tray below, you can always add them to your tray below. You can just take a little bit like I'm doing here and just add to your tray below. Alright, then I'm going to reset my palette. Now for the water, if you've ever been to Moraine Lake, it's a beautiful turquoise color. So we're going to be using these two, the blue and the green side by side here. So I'm going to take a little bit of that first. I think it's a phthalo green. Increase that brush size. Make sure you get it on your brush before you try to paint it on. And I'm going to check my mixability because I want that back up. And I'm just going to start putting that on here. It doesn't need to be crazy uniform. I'd recommend doing horizontal brush strokes though to start, because in the end that's what we're going to want everything to kind of be, is that more horizontal look. I'm going to take some of the blue and just brush that in, and it's just going to blend itself together. Just keep working your way. Mix in a little bit of white with it here. A little bit of a lighter tone going here. And here we want nice horizontal brush strokes, as I was saying, because the ripples of the waves that we see, when you look at them at a distance, they're horizontal. I'm getting close to the shoreline, but not right up against it yet. I'm just going to increase the size of the canvas a little bit here, move it up. The top of the painting will be out of your view, but we're working on the lake right now anyways, so. And I want it to be level with how I'm standing, so it's easier for me to work on it, so I'm not crouching down trying to paint below me. And again, as you get into these finer details, you can shrink that brush size down and get closer to the shore. Try to get as close as you can. We're going to be adding a little shoreline in there, so you don't need it to be exactly up against it, but get it as close as you can. Remember, you can always press B to stabilize that brush if you need to get right up close to it. And again, even if you're not fully touching it, that's okay. Alright, there's our base down. I'm going to take the blender brush here and just kind of smooth things out. I don't really want much texture on there right now at all, so just smoothing that out. Just be sure not to go into your trees, because we want the texture left on the trees. Alright, now I'm going to work on getting this to be a little bit more uniform. I'm going to try the 1-inch oval brush here and see if I like it. Just keeping them horizontal, just doing some light brush strokes. And I guess when I say uniform, I don't mean like all one color. I guess just more horizontal and the colors that are good. This is just helping us add a little bit of texture to it, and you can see those nice lines, those nice horizontal lines it's giving us. That's what we want here. And I'm just lightly brushing this on. I'm not doing a lot to it. Just lightly brushing it on. It's giving us a nice texture. This is actually working better than I thought it would. And again, I'm going to take that blender brush and just go along and just smooth these lines out that we just made, because they might be a little bit harsh. Just smoothing those out slightly, taking away any harsh texture. Blend things out as much or as little as you want to. Alright, now what I want to do is I'm going to take that smooth 1-inch brush again, and I'm going to take some green here, Take some brown and some black. Obviously not taking enough. Take a little bit of this darker blue here. Sorry, I'm a little bit shaky there. And I'm going to have to leave that color there as it is. Take a little bit more darker blue here. There we go. Take a little bit of this lighter in here. Okay. And actually just a little bit more green to it. Too much green. Okay. And I'm going to try it with this 2-inch brush actually first here. And with this, I'm just going to go in here and I'm just going to add in, it's not working as good as I thought it would. I'm just going to undo those. So maybe, let's try, we're going to try a bristle short flat, and we're going to see how this one goes. Make sure it's loaded on there. That's okay. I like that. And just underneath of these trees, following that line that it takes, we're going to add in the reflections. And then for the front part, we're going to use the other green that we made that didn't have as much blue in it. We're going to add this right in here on this, right in front of the trees here. You can use a little bit of regular green in there as well. Not a lot, but just a bit there. Same with those back trees. I'm going to use a little bit of the light highlighted green that we made. And just add that in there just a bit. Not too much on that one. Now I'll take that blender brush here. I'm just going to blend it out. I'm going to start with some vertical strokes and then do little horizontal strokes. And you can shrink it down so it's thinner. I'm just doing a few little thin horizontal strokes or streaks there, and that'll kind of make it as if the water is warping it, right? Makes the illusion as if there's just that slight movement on the water. Take a step back and look at it and see if you need to add anything, see if you're missing anything. What I feel like I'm missing is I feel like the reflections here aren't dark enough. Like right up against the shoreline, I need to add in some more dark reflections. And just in throughout a little bit of the reflections as well. And then again, just taking that blender brush and just blending things out, making sure there's no texture in there that we don't want. Once you got that where you want it, now we're going to take our, and we can still use the smooth short flat. I'm going to take some of that yellow ochre, take a little bit of white, and I'm going to use a little bit of brown as well. And that's going to be our shoreline. So I'm just going to take that in horizontally there. And it's not going to be super thick towards the back of the lake because it's further away from us. So try not to get it to be very thick there. And I'm just dabbing a little bit of lighter onto it as well, just to give it a little bit of texture. And same thing here as well. I'm going to switch back over to the bristle, make sure that's cleaned off. And we're going to add some of the reflection into here as well. Just brushing it downwards from the shoreline. Okay, take our blender brush here, just blend this out a bit. And that'll give us a nice reflection in there. Obviously it's not a perfect reflection, neither are any of them. And so at this point there's a few spots I need to fix up with the trees here. So I'm going to use the smooth short flat, take some of this darker green, just dab some of that in there to fix up those spots. Take a little bit of the lighter green as well, just adding those layers. If you want to try the bristle fan brush, you can. And if you want a bit more of a detailed line in here, I'm actually going to try with the palette knife. Just going along, and that's giving us more of a defined shoreline right there. Alright, I'm going to shrink that back down so we can see all of it in our camera view there for you. I'm going to take a step back here just for a minute and take a look at it, see if anything needs to be adjusted before we start adding on the final part. Alright, the only thing that I feel like needs a little bit of a touch-up, it's going to take just kind of this darker blue here. That tree hump there just seems a little bit too uniformly round, and I just want to adjust that just a little bit so it's not quite so round looking. All right, so our next step and the last step that we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding in, as you can see in this image here, adding in these little pine trees. If you've ever been to Moraine Lake, you'll notice that from the viewpoint where this photo was taken, there are a lot of pine trees, and a lot of photos taken at Moraine Lake are with these pine trees in them. And so we're going to add those in because that's a piece that I feel like shouldn't be missed. And so to do that, I'm going to turn down our mixing sensitivity just for a minute here. And as you can see, this one goes almost right to the top. And so I'm going to take just our smooth short flat, because this one on the left, the tree trunk is about the size of this all the way around. Maybe even you could go with the pointed round even, but we're going to go with this one. And we're just going to mix here some black with some brown. Just making a nice, really dark texture. Now remember again, I've said this before in previous tutorials, when you're using the ruler, you hold B, right, and then that line comes up, and you can set where you want your line to be. But however your brush is held at the moment that you hold B, that's the angle that the brush is going to be at when you're using the ruler. So you want to make sure that you set your brush angle properly. For me, I don't want it quite perfectly horizontal because I feel like that's slightly too much. So I'm going to just change it just slightly so it's not. And I'm going to start at the very bottom here. And I'm going to stop there for a minute, and then the reason I stopped there is because I wanted to readjust it again, because at the very top it gets even smaller there. Alright, there's the trunk of our first tree, well, the start of it. I feel like at the bottom it could be a little bit bigger. Alright, I am going to just increase that a little bit. I'll still leave it in the frame for you. Perfect. And bristle fan brush has been our friend to this whole painting. I'm just taking some of the pure brown there, just dabbing it along this tree trunk here. I still have that mixability turned down, and that's okay for this moment. I don't really care too much. Taking some of that darker brown in here because the tree trunk actually seems a little bit transparent up here, and that's going to give you some nice texture. Again, just pure brown. Okay, I'm going to turn that mixability back up a little bit here. And I'm going to take this lighter shade of brown that I already had made for the kind of like the shaly areas. And if that sun's coming from the right side of our painting, we're going to add some of these lighter highlights right over on that side there. I'm actually getting pretty excited about this one. I felt like I was a bit frazzled at the beginning. It's been a while since I've painted this one, and just one of those days, you know. Okay, we got some of those light highlights going right to the top. Going back down the other side, now that the paint is kind of mixed into the brush a little bit, just adding a bit of darker highlights to the other side. Alright, that tree stump is done. Before I go in and add the needles in there and some branches, I'm going to go in and do that same kind of idea here with the other trees that we're going to be adding in. So there's one right here. Oh, that mixability is up. Whoops, let's turn that back down. Sorry if you did the same thing I did. Okay, so we have one tree right there as well. And we're going to add another one in right about there, and this one's actually going to go all the way up to that spot. These smaller ones, you don't really need to add much detail into the trunks because they're so small. All right, now we're going to go in and add a few branches here. So I'm going to take that darker brown. You can see at the top there are some smaller branches. And I'm going to try here, sorry, I need to take that off of there. I'm going to try the smooth fan brush for a minute here. And just go in here, add some darker, I'm going to stick to how I usually do these trees. I was going to try something new there. So what I want you to do is take a dark brown. I'm going to save some of this lighter green over here. Take a nice dark brown, or sorry, dark green. Which one am I using? I want the bristle. You make sure you're using the bristle fan brush. And for this part, I'm actually going to shrink this canvas size down. Otherwise, I'm going to be here forever doing these branches. And I'm literally just going to be dabbing this in. All down the tree trunk here. I want that to be a little bit darker, so I'm just going to add a bit more black to it. This is just the base layer, just like we did with the mountains and everything. We're adding the darker base layer first, then we'll add the lighter highlights over top. And again, that canvas, that mixability is lowered, because if I was trying to do this over top of what we've already put down and things we're mixing, it wouldn't be a lot of fun. Okay, and then we're also going to add some of this along this small guy here. And some of it over here onto this guy as well. So here, if you want to increase the size so you're not going so far out, that's not a bad idea. And don't try to make them too uniform, because not all pine trees are perfect pine trees, right? Some of them are kind of scraggly. I'm going to take a little bit of that brown that's in here, just kind of add a little bit of this throughout, not very heavy, just in a few spots, just to kind of give us a little bit more of the impression that there actually are branches going on here within these trees. Okay, so that's our base. Now we're going to take kind of that medium green. I'm going to shrink this back down for a moment. And then we're going to take that lightest. There you go, this one here. Sorry, that was off the screen. Sorry, I'm just checking the time here. You can do a few different angles here as well. Sometimes if things start to get too uniform, then they look kind of weird, so do a few different angles as you're going down. And just lightly dabbing it in there. If you feel like you need a bit more of the darker, just grab that and put it in as well. I feel like I have too much light, so I need to add a little bit of dark in there again as well. I'm just going to increase that size a little bit here and take a step back and see if there's anything I want to fix. I think we got it. If there's anything that you want to adjust in the mountains and the trees and the shoreline on the lake, now's the time for you to add any highlights or anything like that. Shoreline. If you want to take your rigger brush, use some of this, the darker green, the bluey green. You press the B button there so it's nice and smooth. And I'm just going to sign it. Once I'm finished signing it here, I'm going to give you one more close-up look at the painting so you can see all the fine details. Then just remember to save it, and then you're good to go. So after the close-up here, we'll head to the outro. So thank you for painting this one with me today. I hope you learned something new that you can take on to your next painting as always. If you haven't again checked out my other tutorials, I encourage you to do so you can learn to paint some other scenes. If you have any suggestions of things you'd like to see on my channel, please let me know in the comments below or send me a message, and I'm more than happy to consider those for future videos. So again, thanks for joining me. Subscribe so you don't miss future videos, and we'll see you next time on Brian's Lone Artist.